My name is Greg Sterling. I'm Uberall VP of Market Insights. I'm here with Tijs van Santen, who's the new Chief Customer Officer. We're going to be talking about SaaS and a range of interesting topics in the next little while. So thanks for joining me, Tijs, and welcome
Thanks
to
for having
Uberall.
me.
Great. So just before we get into the meat of the conversation, why don't you give us a little history and background on your experience for context?
Sure. Yeah. So I entered the workforce, in financial services. Did that very briefly, and then I kind of fairly quickly pivoted to enterprise technology sales. Initially in a somewhat of a technical role at Hewlett-Packard, and then afterwards as an enterprise field sales rep. Did that for a few years. Spent then a long time with Forrester Research, where I joined as I think it was called an associate global account manager. That's a whole mouthful. Working, with very large corporations across the globe. And I ended up leading the global sales organization for Forrester, based out of Cambridge, Massachusetts. After 9 years with Forrester, where I learned a lot, I was pretty committed to pursuing the startup dream. And although it took me a while to find the right one, I did a startup for a year in Amsterdam. It wasn't a great success. Then I spent almost a year looking for the next one, particularly struggling to get myself into a SaaS business. There was a lot of people struggle to understand or recognize how some of my Forrester and subscription-based experience could actually translate to a SaaS world. Long story short, I did find somebody who believed in me, and I believed in them. There was a company called at the time Impact Radius, which was a scrappy Santa Barbara-based startup, 35 people, I think $3 million in run rate at the time I joined. And that's where I really had the opportunity to kind of prove to myself, what I could do. And in the 4 years there, managed to build a pretty successful go-to-market strategy and ultimately creating a category leader. I'm still very close to the folks at Impact today, who are approaching, I would say 80 to 90 million in a run rate, and really our global leader in performance marketing. And after that, I spent a good 2.5 years with a New York-based startup called Button, playing somewhat in the same ecosystem, but then much more focused on mobile, and really enjoyed my journey there, particularly because we were a lot closer to the consumer, and it was catering not just exclusively to advertisers, but also more publishers. And I learned a lot, and now I'm here.
Yeah, that was a lot of information. So let me just ask you.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's good. Let me ask you one quick follow-up question. So what you said at HP, you were in a technical role, and then you shifted into a sales role, if I heard that correctly.
Correct.
What attracted you about sales? Why did you make that change?
Yeah, so it's funny because when I went to college, I graduated with a marketing degree, and I'm kind of showing my age here a little bit. But so when I graduated, Philip Kotler was like the kind of the marketing guru, and like a lot of his principles were being taught. And so he was all about, the needs and the wants of the customer, and everything, is around that. And, he advocated, marketing is not a function, it's a philosophy, and everything is ultimately a tool of that philosophy and that function, and also sales. So my initial perception of sales was not the most favorable one. But then when I joined Hewlett-Packard, I actually recognized that, a lot of those folks were having pretty meaningful conversations around how technology strategy could ultimately help businesses achieve their business objectives. And so we were really kind of in that transitional phase of real product and technology sales into much more of a solution, business focused sales transition journey. And that was really appealing to me. And the combination of technology, but then also more business-led conversations, which, when I made that pivot, I was part of the enterprise group, which had a bit of a broader approach. There was still some product focus, but it was a little bit broader. And, HP had a pretty broad portfolio at the time. So that was really appealing to me.
I've always despised the euphemism solutions as a buzzword in sales and marketing, but it's nonetheless widely adopted. So your title at Uberall is Chief Customer Officer.
Yeah.
And the recruiting went out for a Chief Revenue Officer. So that's from an external standpoint, that's a pretty significant difference. What is the significance in your mind of that title shift, or that title Chief Customer Officer versus CRO?
Yeah, it's a great question, and to your point, I think it's a pretty meaningful one, and it's certainly one that we had a few conversations about, and it was a very deliberate decision, right? So I think it represents a few kind of like ideas, and the first one is that Chief Revenue Officer, as the word suggests, the primary focus is revenue, and revenue is something that we as a company care about. Even though the revenue is generated from creating value with our customers. So by changing revenue to customer, I'm trying to send a signal is that ultimately what I'm trying to accomplish in my role is really creating value for the customer, right? The customer is really central at everything that we do. So that's one. So there's a clear signal to the market. To both customers as well as customers. Well, market-facing team, so anything from marketing, anyone in our marketing organization, all the way to success and anything in between. And with that, I want to make sure that everybody understands that I represent every single person in the organization accordingly. And by bringing all these groups together, what we are envisaging here is to really build like a fully integrated end-to-end engagement model that again has the customer as its North Star, so to say, and really think about like what are the needs and the wants across the different stages of its awareness to consideration to purchase, but then also like at the 10th renewal, and that across different personas, depending on the type of organization that we work with, right? So whether it's a large multinational corporation or a small store owner at the corner of the street. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that that's ultimately what I stand for and what the organization stands for, and that's what our primary focus is.
So I want to be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, or skeptic. So the language of customer centricity is very widespread in the B2B and B2C world. It's a kind of mantra that's just received wisdom, and people routinely talk about it in press releases, white papers, talks on stage, and so on and so forth. So, but in most of those cases, in my experience, you don't really have a true expression of that in the behavior or the culture of the company. So let me just challenge you, beyond sort of the language of customer-centric, what does it really mean to be customer-centric, or to put the customer at the center of your operation as a company? What does that mean as a practical matter?
Yeah, and I welcome your challenge, here, and I think it's a really valid point. I think that even what I will say now is almost meaningless, and what I mean with that is that what you say is only matters so much. It's actually what you really do. Right. So I think that why I'm encouraged, and I believe that this approach will work and ultimately be, perceived as such by, the vast majority of organizations that we work with, is that first we have a strong mandate from the board and from the executive team. And, there is, although our investors are certainly expecting, positive returns on their investment, they also understand that, creating value for the customer is going to be the leading indicator in order for us to make that happen. So that's one. And then secondly, it really comes down to, how you, organize and goal your team. And so, look, I'm 1 month in, and so, we're in a kind of a new setup, and we're still revisiting a few things. And so we've now had the first, KPI set deployed at the global customer org level, and one of them is customer centricity, right? And so where we look at like, hey, how much do we really understand? Do we really know who our customers are? Do we really know what they care about? And do we also understand how we contribute, to those objectives or overcoming those challenges, and where are there potential gaps? And by really focusing the organization on that, versus just looking at, some typical SaaS metrics of like average deal size, conversion rate, all those kinds of things, which, by the way, we're also looking at. Don't get me wrong, right? I still have a number to hit. We are sending a strong signal to the organization that's what we care about. And then lastly, what is going to be part of that as well is just really looking to understand customer advocacy, right? So are the people that we work with, how vocal are they, about what it is that we do, and are they true believers, and are they ultimately going to spread the word and recognize that Uberall is a long-term strategic partner that helps them again overcome some of those challenges that we just talked about, or not in much detail, and help them accomplish the things that truly matter to the business.
So I want to zero in on something you just said, which is very interesting. If one of the KPIs in an organization is customer centricity, how do you actually measure that KPI?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question, and it's certainly, I was challenged by the team, rightfully so, and like we're trying a few things in this first quarter together. So a relatively easy one is NPS. So that's certainly something we'll use and we'll continue to use. What we are doing in this particular quarter is really looking at our ability to capture needs that reflect the business needs versus the operational needs, right? Because often what you see in SaaS companies is that there's a lot of focus on the product and the feature functionalities and what it can do and how it can support certain operational metrics, which is important, but it's only, it's only a piece of the puzzle, right? So providing the context and understanding, how we fit into the larger picture and like how much of a priority some of the things are that we're addressing is very important. So one of the things that we're going to measure this quarter is just our, the ability for our sales force, but also our account management or success teams, is just to capture what are those business priorities for our customers. Are we able to have those conversations? And if so, how effective are we in capturing that? And then how is that reflected in the way that we engage and support them? And so I see this as an ongoing KPI that, quite frankly, I still have to learn a lot myself as well. And I will be speaking to, peers in the industry and obviously a lot of our customers and partners as well to further, refine the approach there.
So you alluded to a number of traditional SaaS metrics. You didn't sort of itemize them all, but you sort of flagged them. There's a lot of different SaaS metrics that companies keep track of and investors keep track of. What is in your opinion, if you had to sort of zero in on one or maybe one or two, what is the most important SaaS metric in an organization that's trying to be customer centric to pay attention to or to measure?
Yeah, I think for me it's really CAC to LTV. Right, so CAC is like cost of acquisition, and that has to do with the effectiveness of us to acquire new customers, right? And that kind of like speaks to a whole load of different activities and parts of the organization, from marketing to sales, but ultimately also our customer ambassadors, right? Our existing customers, support teams, the product. Let's not forget about that. And then LTV. Right, our ability to not just tell a great story and convince people that there is value in working with us, but more importantly, actually delivering on that. And I think that LTV is a great expression of that. Now, I realize that when I speak about these, is that they're fairly financial and they might be somewhat us focused,
us centric.
Yeah,
not you centric.
Yeah, to some degree though, because the lifetime value, I would argue, is very much the customer. And we need to make, like, at the end of the day, they have the option to work with us or with others, right? So it's not like we're putting a gun to anyone's head and tell them to keep paying us. No, it's, hey, we need to continually prove that that we're worth our keep, so to say. And that's why I think that the LTV metric is an important one.
So in this sort of discussion of metrics and revenue targets, do you see any tension between the sales targets that often are very ambitious in a startup organization and the notion of being really customer focused or customer centric? How do you reconcile those two values? Is there any conflict there?
Yeah, I mean, there can be, right? So I think that where I typically see the most tension is like in the short term, right? And it's almost like, it's what I experienced, quite frankly, when working at Forrester, where, it was a public company. And so we had to hit these quarterly goals because we had to report to the street. And, we were effectively, if analysts weren't positive about us, that wasn't very good, right? And so we had to do things that were really, more driven by that versus like what made sense for the customer and for us. So I think that from a short-term perspective, and particularly when it comes to hitting quarterly goals, and where you haven't been able to implement, like a truly, customer-centric approach, there can absolutely be tension. But the flip side of that is that I believe that if you consistently are centering yourself around the customer and understand, what that means to you as an organization from an operational perspective, from a cost, and from, what that ultimately results in from a growth and retention, there is no conflict whatsoever. And in fact, my experience is that you'll actually, be on the positive end of this, and that is like you actually will start exceeding your numbers, because it becomes a much easier conversation, right? Because we, by having all this insight, and obviously by having a great product that satisfies like the operational and the business needs, and then having a engagement model that makes it very clear, right? That is centered around like what our customer cares about. It becomes an easier process for them to say, yes, we will work with you, and by the way, we will continue to work with you. And with that, you start embedding more predictability in your growth model. Now, that will take time, right? That's not going to happen overnight. But that's what my experience and what my belief is.
Yeah, the conflict between revenue targets and serving the customer is evident in a lot of public companies. I mean, it's sort of an argument for not going public in a way, but we can point to several prominent internet companies which will remain nameless, and others who are sort of in the broader segment that we operate in, whose products and behavior in the market has been distorted by the need to continually generate revenue at a certain level of scale to please institutional investors, but the market in general. So that's my little.
And I think, I know this might be a controversial, example, but like look at Amazon. Amazon, I think, has been one of the few companies that very consistently kept the customer centric in everything what they did, and for a long time highly unprofitable, right? And everybody challenged that business. Around the valuation and the PE that they were that were demonstrating in the market, but look where we are today. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, and you could even say that really goes to Bezos' own personality in a certain way, and defiance of investors, and just his sort of larger than life persona. I mean, there aren't a lot of CEOs who have that kind of power to tame the investment community. I mean, you might argue Steve Jobs was another one, but many big tech companies are victim to that whole perpetual need to grow quarter over quarter and doing things that are maybe ill-advised for their customers.
Yeah.
But back to your experience. So you've been in a number of different SaaS companies of different sizes and trajectories, and what do you think SaaS companies typically get wrong? I mean, there's a lot of things that SaaS companies are getting right, but what do you think they misunderstand or get wrong in your experience?
Yeah, I would say this is not just SaaS, and so this can happen in other organizations as well. I think it's what I alluded to before is not always understanding the context of how you fit in as a SaaS player or a solution or technology solution, whether it's a platform or a point solution, into the bigger picture, and by only speaking to some of the attributes that your solution brings to the table, and again, not necessarily, starting, with that customer first, like, hey, how do they see the world? Like, who are the different stakeholders that get involved? Like, what are their priorities? And then how do we fit into that? And then actually, talking about yourself and positioning yourself in that context versus just saying, hey, here's what we do. This is why it's important. Now buy me, right? I think that's I think that's a challenge. And then the other one is, and I think that, we've seen some, interesting lessons as of late, is like SaaS business models typically, require a lot of upfront investment, right? And what I mean with that is that the acquisition cost, it will take time, to earn, back the acquisition costs, but balancing that, right? So what I sometimes see is that particularly for like Series B companies that have just raised a good round after seeing, strong growth, and then continuing to do the same thing that they were doing, not realizing that, that next phase of growth takes a different approach, right? And that's, and I've learned that myself the hard way. Yeah.
So on that note, I want to go into, yeah, go ahead.
No. Please finish your thought.
Well, I didn't want to cut you off, but I think the topic of failure is a really interesting one. I mean, often there's much more revealed in failure and much more instructive in failure than in success, because people see very clearly what went wrong, or often they do. And I just want to ask you: is there an experience of failure that you had in any of your companies in the past that taught you a fundamental lesson that you think about on a regular basis, or that you use, today, that you're still implementing?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I fail a lot, and I've learned to actually be okay with that. Learned that being vulnerable, particularly as a leader, actually can be a great asset, if displayed and used, appropriately. I think the thing that I really wanted to do, after Forrester, was build something, right, and really kind of like start from the ground up and shape like new go-to-market, like vision, build teams and all that kind of stuff. And when we started to see our first, signs of like repeated success, I totally failed to plan for execution and operation at scale. Right. So in the earlier stages, when you're 35, 50, 60, and I would say even 70 people, you can still get a lot done by direct involvement, and you're all still close enough where, it will work. But at some point, as you start onboarding more and more people, and you don't really know everyone, by first name, or at least as intimately as you're used to, then the need for a more scalable operating system is grows tremendously. And like this is what like was a real like misstep, that I experienced, particularly at Impact. Is where at some point, we came to realize is that I did not have or not just me, but we as a leadership team did not have, enough control over, our pipeline, our data. We didn't really understand what was happening. And then as we onboarded people, we weren't able to train them, as efficiently as we were when we were a smaller group. And so that required a pretty significant pivot in our approach. Part of that was also, really thinking about like a management bench, right? So bringing in people that are, getting ready for that first line management role as you start, layering in, and you build more functional expertise across the organization. And I think that the biggest thing that I've learned from that, and that's also like a lot of the focus on, where I'm spending my time right now, is creating what I would, call ironically, revenue operations, right, which is kind of a bit of a legacy of the CRO. You could call it customer operations, although Uberall has already an organization that's called has that name, so we're going to stick to revenue operations. And I see three core pillars of that. And so you have it's systems and ops. And this is mainly focused on internal, operating systems. So like, Salesforce is like a really key one, but it could also be Zendesk. and it could be other tools that are mainly there to administer processes that we've agreed on, that we would follow, and then creating the KPIs and effectively the monitoring system to make sure that the execution is happening across the org as we intended. And then in the middle, there is I would say a data and analytics function that really looks at, that really then crunches the data, and that looks at anything from, hey, what's happening in the market? What are we seeing across those execution layers? Where can we optimize? Where there might be some challenges? It will also be the team that is doing capacity planning and trying to really look ahead in terms of how we can grow, where, and so forth and so forth. And then the third component to that is enablement. And enablement is really kind of a learning and development, as well as tools, mainly tools that are leveraged by folks in the field, and to make them more efficient in their jobs. And so that team is responsible for all onboarding, BDRs, AEs, marketing professionals, solution engineers, system, career program, but then also ongoing learning and development. So and you have it's the systems ops. It's very quantitative, and on the far end, it's more qualitative arm, and that is really focused on increasing the productivity and also helping people become more proficient and career development. That team, in my experience, is absolutely critical to the success for high growth and high scaling SaaS organization.
So one of the things that attracts people to this is implied by your previous answers. One of the things that attracts people to startups and that people enjoy about startups is the collaboration, creativity, and to some degree the kind of mania of the environment, where roles are changing. There's a lot of individual initiative, and as you scale, that environment, as you suggested a moment ago, doesn't sustain the organization, or doesn't really align with the organization as it's growing. How do you avoid silos as companies get larger and larger and larger? We all know silos are a bad thing, but how do you avoid them?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard, right? So I think that one of the key components here is consistent communication, right? So, and you kind of you have to over communicate, and it's sometimes I kind of hear myself saying the same thing over and over again, but it's actually really important. And so communication, which really starts, at the top, right, from the CEO and the rest of the executive team, having consistency there. What is our North Star? What do we prioritize and why? And everything has to first, be around that before anything else follows. So there's that, and then there is having those checks and balances in place to make sure that at the operational level we know what's happening. Right, and that it's in line with some of the things that we agreed together, and that we said that we were going to do. Now that's all that's easy to say. Actually making it happen is really not that easy, and particularly in the world that we live in today, where I haven't met a single person at Uberall other than on the screen, right? So my first interaction with the team, which was I think about 160 folks or so, was me talking to my computer. It's
as you are right now.
No, right? Yeah. It's really strange, and and so I think we need to continually remind ourselves is hey, let's make sure that we're very consistent in our communication and that we're clear, right? So managing expectations and being very transparent around hey, this is what success looks like. These are some of my non-negotiables, some of the behavioral things, some of the activities that we all agreed that we would do, and then between that you leave a lot of freedom, and that people to your point apply their creativity and also allow the organization to bring that up and reward that, which by the way includes letting people make mistakes, right? If we're not making mistakes, that means that we're not learning new things, right? Let's not make the same mistake over and over again, right? That's a bit silly, but yeah. That's I guess what I would say to that question.
So we could go on talking for quite a long time. I want to ask you two quick final questions, and then I'll let you go. you're a European who's worked with a lot of US-based companies, and now you're at a Berlin-based company, a European company. What do you see as the biggest cultural differences between the two?
Yeah, so I think that, well, one is that just like in North America, right, there's a lot of, you have cultural differences between the different regions, but at least, everybody more or less speaks the same language, and all kind of like has loyalty to the same flag, right? It roots more or less at the national level for the same team, right? That's already not the case in a European company. So you have, there's more cultural fragmentation, from, just a German versus a French person, or a Dutch person, English person. So you have more, cultural diversity, I think it almost is a given. I think that the second thing is what I've noticed so far is that in North America, the people don't tend to be as confrontational, within the organization, particularly to leadership in public forums. And I'm sure that there's companies where that's not the case, but I'm just generalizing a little bit. I think in Europe that is a little bit, more prevalent. I think that could actually be a good thing as long as it's, measured. There is like the basic rules of civility and respect are being applied. And by the way, I'm not suggesting that that's not the case at all at Uberall, right? Not at all. But I would say that that's probably one of the bigger differences.
So as a final question here to kind of wind everything up, tie it up. What you as you sort of looked after Button, as you looked for your next opportunity, you had a number of choices. I'm sure. What was attractive to you about Uberall in particular?
Yeah, so every opportunity that I've had the privilege to consider, I kind of like look at three things. So the first, I look at the team, right? So most of the companies I spoke with, if not all, were startups. So where there's a founding team and an executive team, and there's a real kind of assessment like, hey, what's the chemistry with the CEO, and the founding team, as well as the rest of the executive team. Do we get along, right? We don't have to agree on everything, but do we see eye to eye on some of the core, the core elements like culture, the importance of people, really looking after and investing in your workforce, really seeing that as your most important asset. We spend, even though it's on screens, we do spend a lot of time together. So let's make sure that is time well spent, and we enjoy that. So that's one. The second one is really about the industry, the category, and the products that we have to offer. And I was really excited about the strength of Uberall's core business, which let's not forget, we are all about enabling and empowering local businesses offline. And obviously our world, our target customers have had a horrific year. And despite that, we've been able to, create enough value to continue growing as a business, which is quite impressive. On top of that, I believe that, what, Victor and the product team are doing, with evolving more to a platform, I'm actually really excited about the opportunity that lies ahead. And, I'm sure we get to speak about that in more detail another time. And then lastly, what I look at is okay, what's the role? What's the opportunity? What's the opportunity for me to create value for the organization, from day one? As well as what is the opportunity for me to learn new things and grow as a professional, and learn new things.
Okay, that's great. So thank you very much, Tijs. A lot of great information, and I look forward to talking to you again face-to-face next time.
Let's do it. Thanks, Greg.
Okay.